Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, How to Modernize Your Performance Management for 2018, sponsored by A-Team and presented by Zorian Rotenberg. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI credit and can also be used for SHRM credit. Please be sure to attend the complete webcast in order to receive your credits. After the webcast, you will receive an email from HR.com within 1 to 2 business days. It will include the certification credit information. You can also log in to HR.com and go to your View My Credits page, where you can see the credits that you have received. If you have any questions today for our presenter or for HR.com, please type them into the Questions tab on your GoToWebinar control panel, and we will follow up with you. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our presenter, Zorian Rotenberg.
Kathy, thank you so much for having me today. Everyone, welcome. Today is going to be hopefully an interesting and educational and hopefully somewhat entertaining webinar as well. We're here to educate and inform. And just to give you a quick backdrop on myself, I'm not your typical HR leader. I'm actually a business executive. I've been a vice president on management teams at a couple of very high growth, successful companies. So everything that I present here today is really taken from the business perspective to combine with HR best practices. So I bring to the table what I've seen as best practices in running effective businesses from an operational perspective and how that fits in with the HR working together with the operational executive to make things work extremely effectively at an organization. So on our webinar agenda is the following. These are 4 big sections, pretty meaty, if you will. Each one of these sections has a lot of information. So hopefully you have you're prepared to absorb good information and hopefully put it to use. We're going to talk about what is performance management. Or maybe more like, what is performance management really? And then we'll talk about the story of traditional performance management, the new and modern approach, and then we'll talk about the right way to do this modern performance management, modern continuous performance management. It's a topic that's really very popular today. It's considered one of the top 3 or top 5 HR priorities by a number of organizations globally. Today, there's a major tsunami, major wave happening in this transition from the old school, outmoded, traditional approach that we will look at statistics to see how it doesn't work, to the more modern approach that works extremely effectively. And the disparity between the old and the new is pretty significant. So let's get started and talk about, first and foremost, what is performance management? Let's sort of lay the ground here. My favorite definition really comes from Burson by Deloitte. I'm sure not a lot of you know Burson. It's a leading organization on research on HR best practices. And what is performance management? Well, employee performance management is a set of management practices that do the following. They establish measurable objectives, right? You can't really manage any kind of performance before first and foremost establishing clear objectives, right? Doesn't make any sense, because then what exactly are you measuring or managing or trying to improve if you haven't established the baseline in the first place? And then, of course, you're trying to attain these objectives and use this information to improve performance. This will be a recurring topic today through coaching, compensation, but we'll talk a little bit about that. Development and other means, through feedback and other areas that we will discover today. But most importantly, this is where I really love to emphasize this particular point. Performance management is management. And we'll talk about that management is something that managers or operational employees throughout the organization that have people under them or teams, people that they manage, they're the ones who are executing performance management. And I emphasize that because a lot of times it's considered that performance management is a problem of an HR department. That's a myth. We'll talk about that later. It's not fair that that would be the case. because it's actually executed at the front lines by management and really empowered and brought as a best practice by HR, of course. So in Wikipedia, there's a definition that performance management includes activities that ensure that goals or objectives are consistently being met in effective and efficient manner. And that PM is a process by which organizations align resources, systems, and employees to strategic objectives. So setting objectives in the first place plays a key role and is one of the pieces of the whole pie. And we will have a precise, detailed recipe towards the end of this presentation about how modern performance management is done and how data has proven it to work very effectively. Now let's cover it really quickly. Is performance management really effective and important at all? Is it really important? Because, you know, sometimes people can look at it and say, oh my God, it's a lot of work. Do we really even need to worry about it? Is it necessary? Well, absolutely. So, you know, obviously the process defines and communicates your culture, the expectations, and how managers at your company behave. And also, the process should teach leaders on how to coach and develop people. The concept of developing is, again, a recurring theme here, because it's not about simply evaluating or assessing people or their performance. It is about developing, thus improving and enhancing that performance at your organization, right? It's one of the most powerful tools overarchingly at any organization to really drive results and make sure that your culture and everyone is really aligned and on the same page and executing effectively as a team. So, you know, as the last point, a lot of times performance management traditionally, in a very sort of legacy outmoded fashion, has been done incorrectly, primarily for compliance and to create control and mitigate risks, but not really improve performance. And that's really the big difference between the old and the new. So let's talk about the story or the history of traditional performance reviews and performance management, which really were kind of one and the same, pretty much synonymous up until probably the past 5 to 10 years. So, you know, late 1800s, you know, 19th century, the Federal Civil Service Commission began using the performance merit rating system. Early 1900s, Lord and Taylor introduces performance appraisals to appraise performance, not to improve it, to appraise it. And many companies in the 20th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, are now influenced by Frederick Taylor's management, or scientific management, as it was referred to, approach of appraising performance. During World War I, the US military uses this system to dismiss poor performers in the military. And during World War II, and during 1940s overall, majority of US companies used appraisals to assess and document poor performance, right? So you see, like, they're not emphasizing the good performers or emphasizing how to improve performance. They're just documenting poor performance. And the US Army was using force ranking to assess the potential of their soldiers. Very interesting, very military style. During 1980s, Jack Walsh kind of continued with a more updated approach of the World War I and World War II performance management and performance reviews. And he championed this performance review system to reward the top 20% and get rid of the bottom 10%. So it's very kind of like forced, you know, very military type system, if you will. Then during the 1990s and 2000s, there were several shifts, starting with McKinsey's research that began de-emphasizing this kind of assessment and forced rankings and emphasizing much more the need for developing your talent and rewarding performance, right? So developing and increasing performance, developing your talent. And this was sort of in the 90s and 2000s, the early beginning of this kind of modern movement that's based on McKinsey research and some other research out there about transitioning away from these kind of assessments and evaluations that are purely for that purpose, and much more towards the development component of performance, increasing and improving performance, developing your talent at your organization. And then I would say in the past 8 years, and maybe even in the past 5 years more so than the past 8 years, sort of the latter part of the 2010s, this emerging new continuous performance management movement has really taken off. And it's based on the research from the prior decade, from McKinsey times, right? And now much more profound. And it's all about focusing on the continuous, ongoing, real-time process, not this once-a-year annual snapshot, right? And much more on performance improvement and development, and not just appraisal and evaluation. So you see this kind of like 100-year period, if you will, of like slow but sure transition. And in the past, decade, the past maybe 10 or even 5 years, it has really been much more profound, much more powerful, and a lot more companies have been coming public and officially announcing, and you could read it in the Wall Street Journal and in Inc. magazine and in Forbes, that it's a thing, it's a real movement. It's actually really profound and happening right here, right now. So that is the history of performance management and the old school, old style, outmoded once-a-year performance review. Many books have been published that are specifically attending to this topic. A book like Abolishing Performance Appraisals, Performance Reviews. For many people, the whole idea of not doing them is almost seen as irresponsible, right? And this is a thing, right? You talk to a lot of HR executives. Up until recently, not doing the old school method seemed completely irresponsible. We'll actually have a quote later on from a famous practitioner in HR just about that, when she actually transitioned her old company, and when she talked to other HR leaders at different conferences and trade shows, they thought it was absolutely crazy, right? It's like a sacred cow, in her own words. Another book, I wrote this book because so many managers and employees told me that they dread the performance review and thought it is a waste of time. And we're going to look at some statistic about how much of a waste of time it really truly is. So there are books written about it, not just blog posts or articles, books on this topic. Harvard Business Review got into this, and Harvard Business Review is not an HR-focused publication. It's a publication for executives and managers, right? And they picked up on this topic, put it right on the cover, right? This is 2015, a couple of years ago. Reinventing performance rankings, right? A radical new way to evaluate talent. Then there's another article, The Performance Management Revolution. Oh my God. I mean, we're not talking about just reinventing or doing it slightly better. We're talking about a revolution here in Harvard Business Review. Again, targeting executives, CEOs, chief operating officers, and managers globally, right? Millions of readers of Harvard Business Review. This is not an HR-only topic at all. You must have also heard about a famous case at Adobe. It became really famous, and a lot of HR conferences have covered Adobe as a leader in transitioning away from the old to the modern approach. So Donna Morris, who joined Adobe in 2002, I mean, this was a while back, she talked about, and this article is from 2014, and this is when the story started getting out and became really popular recently, and continues to be. But they noticed that their annual, once-a-year performance review, which is a central part of human resources job, was not really working effectively, right? Wasn't much of a resource to the humans that it served. I thought that was a funny way to word it. At one point, the planning alone took 9 months. I mean, that's unbelievable. She said it was like preparing to give birth. Too funny, right? And then, of course, like in this last paragraph in this snapshot of the part of the article, it talks about how she was promoted to senior vice president of people. And it's funny because no doubt she would be, because she's done something smart. She transitioned away from something that clearly was not working, was not effective, and certainly with 9 months of planning was not efficient at all. She said that Adobe calculated that the annual process required 80,000. By the way, this is not an extra zero by error here. 80,000 hours of time from its 2,000 managers. 40 hours per manager per year. So full week just to do performance reviews. That doesn't make any sense. There was an article about Deloitte, this was also in the Harvard Business Review, and they said, we tallied all the number of hours the organization was spending on this, and it said it consumed close to 2 million hours a year to do this old school, outdated legacy once a year performance review. Just to think about numbers is kind of funny, but let's put it into real profound perspective here for laughs and giggles. But this is equivalent of 50,000 work weeks. 50,000 work weeks. So take 2 million hours here on the prior slide, divided by the number of hours in a work week, and you get with 50,000 divided by 40, right? Which is about 1,000 years of work for one person. Nobody has ever lived that long. Or one full year for 1,000 people. I mean, look, yes, it's funny, but it's real. It's a huge suck of time because it's done incorrectly, right? In the Washington Post, even Washington Post, she's picked up on this. They said, why must we continue to have these awkward conversations in which both sides try to recall what employees accomplished nearly 12 months ago? We're hearing everywhere, even in the Washington Post, it's not working. Let's look at some statistics and then move on, right? You've probably seen this before, that 95 out of 100 managers are dissatisfied with their company's performance review and management systems. 95 of 100 managers. These are managers at your company, right? These are people who are managing other people. So basically anything they think is ineffective, it basically trickles down to a whole bunch of people under them. 90% of HR professionals, this isn't managers or executives or employees, HR professionals, 9 out of 10 don't believe their company's performance reviews provide accurate information. My God. 58% of executives, CEOs, COOs, VPs, SVPs, say that the current system, does not drive employee engagement or higher performance. Then why the heck are we doing this? To throw out some more statistics from employers, 81% say managers spend too little time in continuing ongoing conversations with employees about performance. Well, what the heck are they spending their time on? 62% of employers say that managers spend insufficient time helping employees set objectives. Okay, well, if you don't set objectives in the first place, what are you executing towards? Right? 63% of employers say their managers spend 4 hours or less per employee per year. Per employee per year, 4 hours. You have a whole year over 2,000 hours, but you're spending only 4 hours per employee per year on performance conversations. What in the world is going on here? Former SVP of People at Google, this was quoted in Why the Annual Performance Review is Going Extinct in the Fast Company. Performance management, as practiced by most organizations, has become a rule-based, bureaucratic process existing as an and in itself, rather than actually shaping performance. Let's just do this for the purpose of doing it and for no other reason. Well, he says employees hate it, managers hate it, even HR hates it, right? Nobody likes it. And yet, and this is a people process, right? So majority of us here on this webinar are in HR, right? And in HR, we're all about people. We're all about driving the best talent development at our organization, managing performance effectively, managing people effectively, but we're seeing all this done completely ineffectively and inefficiently, yet our people are 70% of our P&L every year. So if you look at financial statements, right, that cost, and I hate the word cost because when it comes to financial statements, it's called cost. But when it comes to HR, it's an investment, right? It's just the other side of that same coin. But when you look at dollar signs, it's 70% on average. And yet that 70% is treated completely ineffectively with time wasted and performance that's actually getting hurt, not improved with the current process. So effective HR teams today, in the past 5 years for sure, and now are very rapidly transitioning away from the legacy approach, right? It's too complex. Once a year doesn't work, doesn't focus on developing, right? Does not focus on improving. So let's do the modern approach, and let's talk about that. And before we go here, I just want to know like how much time to spend going into the granular detail of the modern approach, or just really breeze through the slides here. So Kathy, maybe we can do a quick poll. I'm just curious how many folks are actually not doing it yet, which is okay. That's why we're here for what we're here for. Let's run the poll here really quickly. So you'll see a poll. If you could please answer the question on where you are in the process. And then, Kathy, maybe we can show results very briefly. What do we got here?
Okay, so we've got about half the audience has voted. We'll just leave it open just a few more seconds here. All right, everyone, I'm going to close it off in 5 seconds, so get your votes in. Okay. And I'm sharing the results now.
Is that right in the... So I cannot, but I think we can see them in the actual GoToWebinar app, right? So what I see here, I'll just say it. So 60% did not yet start. That's fine. That's great news, because for all of the 60%, on average, this is an opportunity to start and bring real improvements to your organization. This is a huge, real strategic impact. 21% started recently. Great. And 18% have been doing it for more than a year. So fantastic. Well, let's spend a little bit of time on the modern approach for the 60%. And for the ones that started recently, you can sort of compare notes and juxtapose what we're going to talk about to what you're doing. And for the rest of who've been doing it for more than a year, we will hopefully give you some more interesting ideas to improve on what you started. Good job. So let's talk about, for the modern approach, ultimately, what is the goal with doing performance management, right? What is the goal? Well, is it to evaluate and assess people, or is it to improve performance? I would argue it's the latter. Of course, evaluating performance is a subcomponent. It's a part of improving it, right? You can't manage what you don't measure. But the ultimate goal is improving, not purely and exclusively assessing or evaluating it. That's what you have to keep in mind. But traditionally, the legacy approach was mainly to evaluate it, right? And only like once a year, right? And then the other problem is it's directly and strictly linked to compensation decisions, which it really shouldn't be strictly and directly linked to it, right? There are other variables to consider compensation. And by the way, this webinar is not about compensation, but the main point is that it should be done much more, and we'll talk about it, with the improvement component in mind. Not, hey, this is where you're at and here's how we're going to compensate you. There's a big difference. So according to Burson by Deloitte, more than 60% of all companies currently are redesigning or have redesigned their performance management. More than 60%. And Forrester says that going forward, employee performance will be transformed to deliver results using continuous methods, right? Not the once a year, but continuous. And we'll define what exactly that means in just a minute. And with advanced technologies, right? So the technology is going to empower and enable this continuous process to be done much more effectively and efficiently. At Harvard Business Review, in the Reinventing Performance Management article, they said that once a year goals or once a year check-ins or reviews really are too batched for a real-time world. And conversations about year-end ratings are generally less valuable than conversations conducted in the moment about actual performance. When I say in the moment, look, I don't mean literally everything has to be dropped and right in the meeting, the person needs to get some coaching feedback. No, but in the moment means in real time. So what, typically that could mean one-on-one meeting between a manager and an employee that week, right? And having these one-on-ones is absolutely critical. A lot of companies still don't ask managers to do them, and a lot of managers don't do that. But that's really what it means. You have to. That's the effective way to manage people. What is continuous, right? So it's a set of continuous progress check-ins. Progress check-ins or check-ins, as sometimes they're called. It's a thing, right? it's that one-on-one, either in person or through a technology, right? Our product does that, but this is not about our product. But there are methods of doing it through a technology. You don't want to do it by email, but it allows you to take a snapshot, ask questions, give some coaching, etc. But not just once a year single event. And these check-ins are focused on developing your talent and improving performance, not just assessing performance or evaluating people. And Deloitte Bersin research demonstrates that organizations with this continuous focus have better employee, talent, and business results. This is real. Going back to Adobe, and Donna Morris, who we talked about a couple of minutes ago, she said that swapping out the annual review in favor of this continuous check-in, the progress check-in, allowed Adobe to have a lightweight process that served rather than distracted from people doing their best work. Remember, 9 months of planning, that's quite a distraction, as you remember from a couple of slides ago. What about GE? GE said that, a head of HR at GE said, the world isn't really on an annual cycle anymore for anything, right? It's all about continuous. So GE is moving toward continuous touch points between managers and employees. And if GE is doing this, remember GE, we talked about in the 80s, Jack Welch at GE instituted this kind of forced ranking, right? Sort of based on, World War I and World War II system, right? And now GE is actually moving away from that and completely transitioning away from that. Another thing is that traditional and outdated approach was all about collapsing together, kind of gluing and mixing together the annual review with annual goals and with compensation. And that was incorrectly done. The modern approach separates these out, where you have these quarterly and mid-year and annual meetings, right, that are a little bit more formal. And compensation is not part of that. It's a separate piece of that. But then what's another key piece is this kind of agile objectives goals, like an OKRs, objectives and key results, is the system that Google made really popular. But it's that same thing. It's agile objectives. That's all it is. And these ongoing, continuous, real-time check-ins, right? So all of this kind of works together, but it's not collapsed into one conversation. Bersin said that the hottest and most disruptive area of HR today is this redesign and transition away from the old traditional performance management to the modern one. And what are the companies doing this? Well, it's like the who is who of global high performance organizations, right? Some of the world's best companies. And this is a very small list. There are a lot more companies out there that I can add here that are doing it the modern right way. In fact, you've probably read about Goldman Sachs just recently in the Wall Street Journal, Facebook, Gap. I mean, you know about Google. Deloitte has shifted away. Remember all those hours that it took Deloitte, 2 million hours a year to do the old school approach. So now let's talk about the right way to do continuous performance management. We already know what it is. Let's talk about the right way and give you a specific sort of recipe for that. So look, here's the thing. The performance of your company is truly directly linked to the performance of your people, okay? It's no secret. I mean, the company is not run by itself. And I speak about it as an executive, excuse me, as a manager, right? I study HR, right? Our company serves the HR leaders, right? It allows HR to be empowered and enabled to institute the modern continuous performance management as a best practice in their organization, right, through our technology. We serve HR, but I come to it from a business executive perspective. What I think about is business results. It's people's performance. The companies don't run themselves, right? Without people, the companies mean nothing. And ultimately, every executive or every CEO they focus on business results. They focus on the performance of their company, which is directly a function of how their people perform. So what HR does is extremely strategic for the company. Yet there was this another Harvard Business Review article. It's time to blow up HR and build something new. So let's not worry about the title. It's kind of scary. We're not trying to blow anyone up. Come on, HBR. But what they are really saying is the following. They're talking about the new strategic role for HR, not only for chief HR officer, but really HR overarchingly. In fact, one of the sort of key giveaways of the transition of HR recently in the past 5 years to a more sort of modern HR strategic role, you could almost see it in HR titles, right? A lot of times you now see someone who's not vice president of HR or director of HR, but vice president of people or vice president of people operations, right? And it's a much more strategic role today. And the reason for that is to a large part due to this shift in performance management. This realization in the past decade that whatever we've been doing as organizations with respect to performance management hasn't really been working. And it's critical that HR leads the way in taking the company in this more modern, more strategic direction of improving performance, of having a seat at the table with a VP of sales, VP of marketing, VP of engineering, VP of product, with a CEO, COO, in driving the organization forward. I took a couple of key points out of this article. The first one being CEOs know that they depend on their company's HR to achieve success. Businesses don't create value, people do. It's exactly what I was saying about my own work recently as a CEO of a company. Elevating HR requires totally redefining the work content of the Chief Human Resources Officer, right? So that big part of the HR executives, not only executives, by the way, but everyone in HR is driving the people function strategically forward, right? HR is not there purely for all the administrative parts that are critical to HR, right? Like HR is critical for the strategic role. Business will benefit from better management of not just its financial resources, but also its human ones, right? And HR should recommend ways to use human capital to unlock or create value, right? This goes back to that strategic impact through this much more modern way of taking people, right, and improving or developing that talent and improving the performance of that talent. That is really what this article is about, and what is the new age of HR. It really is. So what is it that the leadership team at each organization wants? Well, they want organizational alignment. Everyone on the same page, meaning, rowing the boat in the same direction, right? There's a couple of strategic objectives that every board and CEO have for the company. They want the people of the company, right, to be strategically aligned to that and to perform and go in that direction. The leadership team wants the focus on what truly matters for the company. They want higher transparency and accountability. They want to improve every manager's effectiveness, right? For each company, I would say a big, call it maybe, 20% of each company's management, right? Like on, count of employees, I guess, right? Management at every level, executive level, general manager, middle manager, frontline manager, however, large is your organization, you're going to have layers of management. And you need to focus on improving the effectiveness of each manager, because if a manager is ineffective, then the people who report to that manager, that ineffectiveness impacts those people. It all trickles down. It's like a waterfall, right? So if the manager is effective, that team is effective. The cost of any one manager being ineffective, right, in managing the performance of their team is really the cost of all of these people under that manager operating ineffectively. That's hugely costly. Remember earlier we talked about that 70% of your investment, financial investment, or sort of the other side of the coin of the financial statement is the cost, annual cost of your company on a P&L, right, statement, on your income statement. 70% is your people. It's not, real estate or the software that you buy or anything else. It's your people, it's the cost of people, right? So managers being ineffective means that 70% is being spent inefficiently and ineffectively. It's a huge burden, not an investment anymore. And that's a shame, right? That's very costly to your company. And the leadership team also wants data-driven management and decision-making. So, data-driven management means having clear objectives and making decisions in light of achieving these objectives that are aligned to your corporate objectives, right? Not just fly by the seat of your pants. Hey, let's go do work and let's do stuff. What does that mean? Let's set clear objectives and perform towards those objectives, not just do stuff, right? And finally, increasing performance and driving great results. Now, more specifically on what every CEO wants, right? There are some CEOs on this webinar, and a lot of us are in HR, primarily reporting to the CEO or COO or president or CFO, right? Or to the board directly, maybe. But the point is, what is every CEO, the one key leader of the company? They want several key things. They want to know, is everyone clear on their individual objectives and how those tie to our corporate objectives, right? Can our organization measure everyone's performance objectively and consistently, right? Can we measure that? Because if we don't have clear objectives in the first place for the individuals, and we're not doing performance management in a continuous manner, we're not really measuring that performance effectively at all. Is our organization getting the performance it needs from all of our employees and teams? Do we know that or do we not? Because if we do annual performance reviews, we don't do continuous performance check-ins, we don't do continuous performance management effectively, if we're not setting clear objectives, if we're not doing it the right way, the organization doesn't even know if it's getting the performance it needs from the employees. How would you know that? What is the objective and consistent way that you could possibly know that? You can't, right? And finally, can we use data to better understand performance? Like, data is everything, right? It's not sort of finger in the wind, let us guess and assume and pretend approach. It's, can we look at the actual information on progress and performance being made? So we can actually analyze if we're getting the right performance and if we're measuring it effectively, and if people are actually aligned and executing in the right direction. So the next thing is not just about goals, but goals combined with feedback. There's research all over the place, but Gallup is the one we know the most about in the HR profession, right? When you combine feedback and layer it on top of setting objectives and checking in on those regularly, when you give that feedback regularly, that does increase performance. So just setting objectives and checking in on them is one thing, but providing feedback and systematizing and codifying the process, or saying it in more sort of softer, plain English, is sort of building the culture of feedback at your organization, right? It actually increases performance. So we talked about setting objectives as critical. You can't just not set objectives. In fact, we define performance management from Deloitte, from Burson Deloitte, and from Wikipedia. First and foremost, the process of performance management is the tip of the spear is setting objectives. But when you layer feedback on top of that, that actually increases performance. And we talked about how modern performance management is not just assessing your progress versus your objectives. It's about improving performance, not assessing it standalone and purely assessing it, but actually the end goal is improving it. So you want to take these statistics and apply them at your organization. That means don't just have goals standalone. First of all, make sure you have goals and everyone is setting them. Critical, because you don't have performance management, like we said, that's core part of definition. But don't do just that. Add on the feedback part, build a culture of feedback, engage your managers, train your managers that is absolutely critical. It's part of their job. So rather important. So let's talk about continuous, from Donna Morris again, continuous feedback, right? Feedback is difficult to sustain if it's not happening organically, right? So you got to train the managers and institute that as a culture at your organization. And regular conversations between managers and their employees are now occurring without HR's prompting. That's how they had it at Adobe. That's how you want it. You don't want HR to goad people all the time and go tell them, hey, do the feedback. Hey, do your one-on-one meetings. Hey, do your check-ins. You want to train that so that it's organic, so that it's localized. So the key inside here is HR must localize continuous performance management. It must be done locally through your training, through ensuring that managers understand its importance, right? We're launching a technology that enables that to be automated at your company with notifications, with recognition rewards, with things that really engage your managers to do it regularly. So you in HR don't have to constantly elbow them and say, hey, go do it. They'll want to do it themselves because of what the technology can get in value for them, for the managers and for employees as well, by the way, in terms of data, insights, notifications, and even gamification things like, giving them badges for every time they do so many check-ins regularly. So, but it should be empowered and supported by HR. Again, HR playing a leading role of strategically moving the company in the right direction by training, by empowering managers to do the right thing. Now let's talk about another key thing, and we're going to, by the way, create a recipe and put it all together in just a couple of minutes, but the other piece is recognition and rewards. So Towers Watson Group said recognizing and rewarding employee performance can increase employee engagement by almost 60%, right? Not by 5%, by 60%. And Gallup said employee recognition does increase productivity, retention of your employees, especially the A players that you want to retain, and profit, and even customer satisfaction, of course, makes perfect sense, right? It's a direct relationship when employees are more engaged at work and are more productive. That all kind of affects customer satisfaction through better product, better service, better everything, right? Better employees equals better results. Remember, we talked earlier about how the performance of your company is directly linked to the performance of your people. Well, no doubt. So the shift from traditional to a modern approach, let's look at a couple of things and then we'll define what a check-in is one more time, just to be clear, and then give you kind of the 5-step approach. Then we'll talk about the mistakes to avoid and the biggest myths in this whole modern performance management transition. And then we'll wrap it up, right? We got, what, about 15 minutes left or so? We'll go quick. But look, traditional was all about managing as a compliance process. Once a year, make sure if somebody's not doing well enough, we're in compliance with the law. Great. How does that increase performance? It doesn't. But the modern performance is not all about this like managed as top-down compliance process. It's really much more about empowering through HR owned locally, and not for compliance. It's ultimately for improvement. The process used to be autocratic, right? And then now it's much more. It's not autocratic at all. It's about people development, right? Annual top-down goals. Today it's agile, localized, collaborative, aligned goals. Before it was activities focused. A lot of managers were really focused on, get these projects done, and that's going to play a role in how I'm going to review you at the end of the year. It's not about activities anymore. Activities do not equate to results, right? You can be busy with a lot of activities, and being a busy bee doesn't really necessarily ensure that you're going to achieve results for the organization. But those results have to be made clear through objectives, because objectives are what basically state the outcome and the result, the key result you want in the end. Like the OKRs, objectives and key results. They're the key results you want to see at the end of the quarter. Not, it doesn't matter what activities you do. You got to think about what you need to do to achieve those results, right? But it's the results matter, not your being busy. And the old traditional approach was all about critical biases at the end of the year, like the recency bias, where the manager remembers only the most recent stuff. Well, in the modern approach, because it's continuous, it's not biased because the managers typically do a check-in. Typically, a lot of times we see, we have, thousands of customers globally, and we see people doing it actually weekly for 5 minutes, a quick progress check-in, right? So you're not waiting 365 days and trying to remember what happened, and you're kind of leaning towards the thing that happened a couple of weeks prior to that, right? You don't remember a lot of the good things that have happened, throughout the year. Well, when you do it weekly, and by the way, we'll talk about in a minute what a check-in is. It could be 1 to 4 weeks, depending on your organizational culture and needs. But that's much more frequent than once a year. And look, again, not an annual cycle, it's continuous. These aren't formal annual reviews, they're regular progress check-ins, but every quarter or every 6 months, you can do a more formal kind of snapshot. And you're not focusing on really big wins. You're celebrating progress and small wins. There's actually a book called The Progress Principle by a Harvard MBA professor, Teresa Amable. Great book, highly recommended. The point is, celebrating these smaller wins that happen more regularly is going to have a significant impact on your organization. And it's not a one-way feedback anymore. It's two-way closed loop through these weekly progress check-ins. Now let's talk about weekly. I know some of you may say, you know what, our company doesn't want to do weekly. We'd rather do every 2 weeks. We have a very large customer, big public company, and they're all about telling managers to do it just once a month. And interestingly enough, they started doing it once a month, and that's fine. You want to ask them to do just once a month. We didn't get in their way on that, but we did kind of urge them to rethink it. And interestingly enough, they're now transitioning to doing it every 2 weeks because they realized it's only a couple of minutes, but the impact is very significant. Employees are much more satisfied that they're getting more regular feedback from the manager, through our product, through our technology. And also they're seeing that it takes so little time, but has such a good effect all around and also on alignment. Why wouldn't you want to do it more frequently? It's a good thing, not a bad thing. But it depends on your organization. Organizations that are trying to grow very rapidly, once a week, 5 to 10 minute check-in, where you're basically asking your employees to update where they are on the goals that were preset. The manager looks at the updates, the product can also ask some custom questions about, progress, small wins, or any bottlenecks or obstacles getting in the way. Have a coaching conversation in between. It literally takes just a couple of minutes per employee. So if a manager has, on average about 7 or 8 direct reports, maybe 10, I don't know, it's typically too much, but let's say it's even 10, that's maybe, 5 minutes per employee per week. So less than an hour in a 40+ hour week. The impact is significant. It saves time from impacting productivity through way too many other kinds of meetings, trying to piece everything together, doing it by many disparate emails. This process works really well. So let's put it all together between the goals, the progress check-ins, the importance of combining feedback with the goals, like we talked about, the statistics at Gallup, the recognition and rewards, like I told you at Gallup and Towers Watson, about 60% better improvement, engagement, etc. And these review snapshots that still need to happen, this once a year thing shouldn't be happening all standalone. You could have it twice a year or every quarter, a more formal wrap-up, a snapshot of how you've done throughout the quarter or the prior 6 months. But you see, this system enables your managers to be much more effective. Remember, that's one of the things your leadership team wants, more effective managers. So set goals, right? Then do check-ins on those goals and progress and bottlenecks. We recommend it once a week for like 5 minutes. Very easy to do. In our product, for example, it notifies the managers. It's just a click away. It's very easy, light touch, but with a lot of data and information that helps managers be very effective and employees to stay aligned and engaged. The managers can provide feedback and coaching, can provide recognition, and then the whole performance snapshot allows you to, every quarter, like you put it on a schedule, it's completely automated, makes it easier for HR to see what's going on, for managers to be able to summarize things, but brings it all together and kind of does like this snapshot, wraps things up in a nice way so that, with a bow on top, hey, this is what happened during the quarter. So you see, it doesn't happen just once a year. All of these things don't get eliminated, and you just do a once a year sit down very formally that nobody likes, that actually impacts things negatively. Instead, you do these 5 steps throughout the year. If you do it with a technology, it makes it very automated, very light touch, very easy, supported and empowered by HR, but really makes the management, general management, middle management, frontline manager, executive management, the whole entire executive team get those things that they really wanted, like we discussed earlier in this section. That's the 5 steps to continuous performance management. If you have this in place and it's automated and working well, your company is going to rock and roll. I mean, it's going to be aligned. Everybody's going to work effectively. Things are just going to click really well. And that's where HR is truly strategic, right? Now this is a strategic seat at the table. You are improving performance. You're not just appraising or evaluating people. You're driving performance. You're enabling the entire management team of the company to be more effective throughout all the layers of management, right? And that 70% that we talked about earlier, it's like amplified in value, amplified. 70% of investment, the ROI is like 5x, 10x, right? It's huge. It's a real impact on the company's business results. So the best practice is, look, make it localized. Remember, it shouldn't be HR goading and telling people go do it. It should be empowered and supported. Remember, Forrester said that it's all going to be, the 2 key things to the modern performance management is continuous, but also advanced technology, right? If you use the technology, you can enable it and support it and sort of manage and look at it. But the managers themselves at every layer of your organization, every manager is going to be able to just run it with a user experience designed for the manager and employee. So managers and employees must do these regularly, these check-ins. They should be strength-based feedback. Like in our product, we actually have this sort of kind of like button, right? For any objective that was updated, for any questions that are customizable on small wins, etc. The manager can actually say good job, right? It makes it easy for managers to say good job, because a lot of times they just don't do it. It must be focused on improving performance, not just evaluating it, right? If the focus is not there and the product doesn't enable this kind of recognition component to it, if it doesn't allow you to like people's feedback or progress, you're not going to improve performance. You're simply taking a snapshot and evaluating it. So in recognition, of course, just like I said, very critical to recognize employees. So the pitfalls and mistakes, look, if you're going to do continuous in a way that's non-continuous, that's a fail from the start, right? If you're going to say, oh, we're going to do continuous performance management twice a year, okay, that's not continuous. The next thing is making managers and employees use some traditional HR system. So if you have a traditional HR system, their performance tools are really kind of annual performance reviews with slight facelift. That doesn't work, right? It's not really, it doesn't have these regular progress check-ins. The user experience is not modernized in a way that it can be owned locally by managers and employees. It's just like all about HR, like launching it and sending it to managers to do, versus it being automated with gamification, etc. It's a completely different user experience, night and day. Dropping annual performance review, I also wanted to say, that's not the point. The annual review shouldn't be the only thing standalone. That's what should be killed. But doing a snapshot, twice a year or 4 times a year, and one of these will end up eventually being at the end of the year, it just won't be the one and only thing. It'll be a piece of the puzzle. It'll be one of the steps, right, of the more formal summary and snapshot. And then quick facelift. I see sometimes in HR folks taking an existing HR system that wasn't designed for the managers and operational employees experience, purely for HR. So it's managed by HR rather than empowered by HR, right? And it's different. And it's just a facelift. It doesn't really do anything more than just kind of like slightly tweak the annual review process. Doesn't have the agile goal setting with alignments. Doesn't enable managers to do coaching and check-ins and recognitions. None of that. Doesn't work. It's a fail from the start. Avoid it at all costs, right? Because you're not strategic anymore. You're just trying to patch some kind of old system to make it look like really just doing a small facelift, make it look like you're doing the modern process, but it's not a modern process at all. And the couple of biggest myths, and we're going to wrap up on the next slide with something from an HR leader from Medtronic who did this and had some feedback on the concept. So the biggest myths are, performance management doesn't matter, whatever. Let's just continue to do the performance review. No, yes, it does. Statistics show it can hurt your company if you don't do it incorrectly, or it can really make your company significantly better. Your company is directly linked to the performance of your people. Another one is performance management is an HR problem. No, it's not. It's an executive strategic issue for the company. And finally, managers don't really care about performance. Yes, they do. They very much do. They want it to be enabled for them. Because remember what we said earlier from Deloitte Burson, performance management is just management. That is what managers do. They care. They just need the right empowerment, the right technology, the more modern approach, and for HR to tell them how to do it effectively, right? Take these learnings and train them. A VP of HR at Medtronic said, there were a lot of fears from other HR executives she met at conferences, trade shows. The fears that changes would lead to managers not making tough calls about, even terminating people have gone unfounded, right? This new modern continuous performance management, it is just better. It allows you to still do all the necessary things you wanted to do previously, but a lot better. She also said that this was like a sacred cow for a lot of HR executives. They say, I would love to do that, but, and she said, it's funny. It's just like, why do they think that this switch is going to do something bad? If anything, it's already proven to do much better. And she really was urging people to just go for it. Like, this is the right way to do it. Don't stick to things that don't work. I'm going to skip these couple of slides out of our product that shows you how it's done. If you actually want, we offer free consultation on transitioning to continuous performance management. It's not a product pitch. It's literally answering your questions, give you more strategies for success, sharing more stories, like a ton of research we've done, collecting it from all the best companies in the world, collecting the best practices. There's probably 100 pages of that we've written internally about statistics and data. Just send me an email, Zorian at A-Team, 2 I's, A-T-I-I-M, A-Team, II stands for including individuals. And with the subject line CPM, and we will sign you off for 30 minutes, answer any questions you have, help you in any way we can, even if it's just to build a relationship and help you out, nothing else. Hey, thank you all so much. This is it, and Kathy, I'll turn it over back to you.
Well, thank you so much to Zorian from A-Team for presenting this very informative webcast today. Just a few reminders for the attendees. If you would like to view this webcast again, the archive recording will be available on site for up to 7 days. And the slides will also be available for download. Your webcast credits are stored in your HR.com account. Watch for your email to arrive within 1 to 2 business days. It will contain the certification credit information. Your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment and fill out the exit survey that will appear on your screen. This concludes our webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.